Since this chapter focuses on functions, I want to do a very short video, hopefully, of a special type of function called a piecewise function. So a piecewise function is a function that is made up of multiple pieces, which is where it gets its name. Essentially, based on the x that you're plugging in, the value of the domain you're plugging in, you have to decide which piece to put it in. So if you look at one like this, see, this is what a piecewise function looks like. This is basically saying if you're working with x values that are smaller than 1 or equal to 1, you're going to use the top line, the top expression. And if you are using a value that is x is bigger than 1, you're going to use the bottom line. I like to think of it as like a choose your own adventure book, which is probably not something you've never heard of, where you kind of get to pick the path based on what you're trying to plug in. So the number in the parentheses is the number for x that you're plugging in, and then you have to see which line should I plug it in. It will only go in one spot. So for this one, when you have to do x is f of -3, -3 is smaller than 1. So you're going to put it into the top line of this piecewise function, and you're going to do 2 times -3 minus 1. Your answer, you can use a calculator, you can do it in your head, is going to be your y value and your final answer. So that means when you plug -3 in, you get a value of -7. When you put 1 in, 1 is also going to fall into the top line because this is when x is less than or equal to 1. So since 1 can be equal there, we're going to put in the top line. So we're going to do 2 times 1 minus 1, which is 1. And then finally, f of 4. Now this is the first time we're actually using the bottom line because 4 is bigger than 1. So it goes into the bottom expression. So it's going to be 3 times 4 plus 1. And again, you can use a calculator. You can do it in your head to get your y value. Now, we can't have ones that have lots of different functions, lots of different piecewise functions. So when you're reading this, anytime they're talking about the f function, you want to make sure you're using this one. And anytime we're talking about the g function, we want to make sure you're using this one. And then in addition to that, over here, we'll tell you which line we use. Whether we use the top line or the bottom line will depend on the x you're plugging in. So for this first one, it says find f of 0. So I'm going to go to the f function, the one in green. 0 is smaller than 4, so I'm going to use the bottom line here. So I'm going to have a half times 0 minus 3. Again, you can use a calculator if you need to do the arithmetic to get -3. The one next to it says g of 0. So now we're going to this function, the g one. 0 is bigger than -3. So when we look at the condition to figure out where do we put it, we're going to put it in the top line. Top line says we take the negative of the x value. Well, there's no such thing as -0. We just get 0. Next one says g of 6, so I'm going back to this yellow function. I like color coding it. 6 is bigger than -3, so we're going to put it in the top line, and it's just negative of the x value, so -6. F of 4, we're going back to the green one. 4, we're going to go here because this is when we are equal to 4, so we're going to put 4 into that top line for the x, so it'll be -3 times 4 plus 1. -12 plus 1 is -11. G of -5, going back to the g function here, -5 is smaller than -3, so we're going to go to the bottom line. We're going to get 1/3 times -5 plus 2. Again, you can use a calculator. You're going to get -5/3 plus 2, which is 1/3, or if you want to write it as a decimal, it's 0.3 repeated. And then finally, f of 8. 8 is bigger than 4, so we're going to go into the top line of this f function. We're going to have -3 times 8 plus 1. -24 plus 1 is -23. So that's how you evaluate a piecewise function. I do want to show you a delta math one. Give me 1 second to find it. So sometimes on delta math, what they'll do is they'll say, instead of saying less than a value or greater than a value, they'll say this is the x you use when it's not something, and this is the x you use when it is something. So that's what this one is saying. So this one is basically saying that you're always going to use the top line anytime x is anything other than -2. So anytime x doesn't equal -2. But if x does happen to equal -2, then you're going to use the bottom line to help you figure it out. So with this one, -4 is not equal to -2, so you are going to put it into the top line. So you're going to have a negative of a -4 minus 5, which is a +4 minus 5, which is -1. So I wanted to show you one like that that has an equal to and not equal to. If it's something like that, as long as the x value you're plugging in is not equal to that value, you use that line. If it does happen to be that value, you use the bottom line. And if you do have a constant here, if there's no variable, then when you're going to get that number. So if I want to know what happens when I put -2 in, I just get -2. So hopefully that helps you understand the difference between a regular function where you only have one expression and then a piecewise function that can be made up of multiple pieces.